We are gathered here inside the Lodge, the sacred center of our head office here at Native Child and Family Services of Toronto, in Treaty 13 territory. And I just want to acknowledge that this land has been stewarded. It has been the traditional home of the Huron, Wendat, and Haudenosaunee confederacies, of the Anishinabek people with connections to the Mississaugas of the Credit, and that many diverse Indigenous peoples now call the City of Toronto home. I just also want to take a moment to acknowledge that land has always been a teacher for Indigenous people, and that many of the teachings that we have as Indigenous people come from the land and the territory itself. Today, on the heels of September 30th, on the heels of our first National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, it's so important to understand that Indigenous people have always been innovators, and that much of that knowledge that comes from the land not only has a possibility to enhance the lives of Indigenous peoples, but to contribute to the education and wellness of all Ontarians. And that's why we were so happy, we're so fortunate today to be able to welcome Minister Lecce and Minister Rickford for announcement related to some of the changes happening in education in the province. Chimigwech. I'll turn things over to you, Minister Lecce.
Ani Bojo, Sego, Bonjour, Wache, Ulukut. I'm happy to be joined by my friend and colleague, the Minister of Indigenous Affairs, Greg Rickford, and partners. And I want to thank the traditional knowledge keeper, Vivian Roy, for bringing us together in a good way, and for Jeffrey for hosting us here at the Lodge at Native Child and Family Services of Toronto on the traditional lands of the Mississauga of the Credit. Like all Canadians, I have been saddened by the recovery of unmarked graves at former residential schools across this country. For more than 120 years, Indigenous children across the country were taken from their families by the government, many of whom would never have been reunited with their loved ones. For those children who did not see their family again, they returned home stripped of their culture and identity, carrying immeasurable trauma that has had far-reaching, long-lasting, and ongoing effects in their communities. Today, as we approach the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, we continue to work towards acknowledging and addressing past wrongs that are still felt across Indigenous communities in a present way. It is why we are working closely with Indigenous partners, elders, and knowledge keepers, like Deputy Grand Council Chief James Marsden of the Chiefs of Ontario and Anishinabek Nation, and Joanne Meyer of the Métis Nation of Ontario, through a co-development process to ensure that First Nation, Métis Inuit, and urban Indigenous perspectives are reflected throughout the Ontario curriculum. Already, the curriculum includes mandatory and detailed learning in the social studies grade 4 to 6 courses, and in history in grades 7 and 8 and 10, including mandatory learning on residential schools in grade 8 and 10. Building on this, we are working to complete the full spectrum of Indigenous-focused learning across the elementary social studies curriculum. And this includes mandatory Indigenous-focused learning added to the social studies curriculum from grades 1 to 3. And I'm pleased to announce that our government will pursue and advance, continuing to do so co-developed by our Indigenous leaders for grades 1 to 3, including exploring opportunities for education that specifically focuses on the role of family and resilience in First Nation, Métis, and Inuit communities and nations. First Nation, Métis, and Inuit historical and contemporary realities, Indigenous peoples' interrelationship and connection with the land and the residential school system, and the reclamation and revitalization of identity, of language, of culture, and community connections. Also, Inuktitut is now an available option as a language of instruction at the elementary and secondary levels within the Indigenous languages curriculum. We believe that all students, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, are enriched by learning about the history, the culture, the perspectives and contributions of First Nation, Inuit, and Métis and Inuit individuals and communities in Canada. It's why that on tomorrow, on the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, all schools will participate at the request of our ministry for an opportunity for learning on residential schools and on reconciliation. And by working towards a more comprehensive curriculum every single day, we are committed to continue our work to deliver on the key calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. in advancing reconciliation in a meaningful way. We are also investing more to support Indigenous students with the aim of boosting graduation rates and enabling economic opportunity for this and for future generations of Indigenous students. For this school year, on top of the existing funding, we are announcing $24 million in dedicated funding that will allow Indigenous partners, school boards, and other education stakeholders to provide supportive, culturally appropriate, and safe education opportunities for Indigenous students while strengthening Ontario's education system and the well-being of all learners in this province. We also recently approved sustainable multi-year funding agreements on the request of many chiefs of this province who have said that we need long-term funding. And it's why we're investing $3.2 million over 3 years in First Nation education, which will strengthen the existing partnerships with the Chiefs of Ontario and the First Nation provincial territorial organizations. This will provide stable funding, including for full-time regional education coordinators to work directly with communities and with students to build trust and authentic relationships to identify, to prioritize, and to support First Nation students' education and their well-being as well. Additionally, the Métis Nation of Ontario is receiving $850,000 towards collaboration with school boards and the learning of Métis knowledge and integration of this knowledge into Indigenous education programs and initiatives, as well as multi-year funding of over $400,000 for the River Program, an alternative secondary school program that provides academic and cultural supports to Métis students. Our government is committed to ensuring every Indigenous student across Canada is supported so that they can succeed and that they're treated with respect, which includes the celebration of the important role that Indigenous peoples continue to play in Canada. Miigwech, Naiwe, Marci, Tavusi. Thank you, and I'm now pleased to introduce my colleague, Ontario's Minister of Indigenous Affairs, the Minister of Northern Development, Natural Resources and Forestry, Greg Rickford. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you, Vivian, for starting us off in a good way, and I bring some tobacco to honor your important words and the opportunity to be here in this longhouse, the spiritual center, as Jeff described, of the Native and Child and Family Services of Toronto. And I also want to thank Terry Jaffe, who received me earlier this morning, made us comfortable here as we addressed other matters. She's the senior supervisor of cultural programs, and thank you for our conversation. Bonjour, Wajie Kinawa. Greetings, everyone. Traditionally, Toronto was a gathering place for many Indigenous nations, including the Anishinabek, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, and of course, the Métis people. And I acknowledge that we are meeting in the area covered by Treaty 13, also known as the Toronto Purchase. And I pay my respects in particular to the Mississaugas of the Credit. I'm pleased to be here today with Minister Lecce, Traditional Knowledge Keeper Vivian Roy, Chief James Marsden from the Chiefs of Ontario, great to be with him, and Joanne Meyer of the Métis Nation of Ontario, and all of you, to announce our government's intention to enhance Indigenous perspectives within Ontario's school curriculum. There could not be a more important thing to do, in my view and in the view of this government. This twofold commitment to expand Indigenous-focused learning in schools and invest almost $24 million to provide a wide range of supports for Indigenous students demonstrates our belief in achieving reconciliation through direct and meaningful action. Like all Canadians, I was heartbroken to hear of the discovery of burial sites and unmarked graves in Western Canada. Sadly, we know there are many more sites, some of them here in the province of Ontario. Our government has responded swiftly and taken leadership. We made an initial funding commitment of $10 million over 3 years to establish a collaborative process, Indigenous-led, in an effort to identify and move towards commemorative activities with respect to the Indian residential schools and their burial sites in more than 18 locations in Ontario. We're committed to ensuring that this process is Indigenous-led and guided by the wishes of Indian residential school survivors and Indigenous elders, leadership, and communities. Over the past couple of months, we've been engaging with Indian residential school survivors, Indigenous leadership, elders, and communities to determine next steps in this difficult work. Yet, even as we honor the past, we still have a responsibility to look to the future. We have to increase public awareness and understanding of how Indigenous peoples shaped our country and how they continue to be affected by the Indian residential school experience, systemic racism, and various other difficult issues. Young people of today are the leaders of tomorrow. They will grow into the professionals, to the tradespeople, the thinkers, and the influencers of the future. And I believe that by teaching our children about our country's past in an honest, and sensitive way, we can create a more enlightened, harmonious, and respectful society for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. This, my friends, will help make reconciliation real and help find justice for all those Indigenous children who are lost and are now being found. In closing, I want to thank the Ontario Public Service. Many of our ministries have been engaged in setting up learning sessions to be informed. We've had an incredible uptake. I want to thank all of our amazing teachers out there who, on their own initiative, have taken up important discussions and lessons and instruction and discussion with young children, including two of my own here in the city. As my new friend, Terry Jaffe said, tomorrow is a somber day of reflection, but it is also a day of opportunity to enlighten and inform the rest of Canada of the impact of Indian residential school, to learn about it in our school curriculum, and to move forward and focus on the amazing opportunities we have together. Chimigwech, I want to thank you all for this opportunity, and I'd like to introduce Deputy Grand Council Chief James Marsden to the podium. Thank you. I know him as Jim Bob. I should have introduced him as
Hello.
Hey, Jim Bob.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I was having some technical difficulties. I'm on the Clearwater Treaty area of the Chippewas of Beausoleil Island First Nation, Grama First Nation, and Georgian Island First Nation. I'd just like to say greetings to all the guests on behalf of Regional Chief Glenn Hare. I'd just like to say First Nation leadership in Ontario value the establishment of maintenance of strong collaborative relationships built on trust to ensure the needs of First Nation learner are met in both provincial and per First Nation educational settings. This means strong, productive, and healthy leaderships between the First Nation communities and organizations, the Ministry of Education, as well as strong, productive, and healthy relationship between First Nations, families, communities, with local school boards and schools. Collaboration is key in all phases of projects, programs, and initiatives that will impact the learning environment of the First Nation learners. We need not look for examples and the recommendations to this end from the United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples to the 94 calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to Ontario's very own Auditor General reports. The time of unilateral development and imposition of approaches and recommendations by the settler governments does not work. Now is the time for collaborative and co-development. First Nation leadership in Ontario is very pleased with the announcement that our request for the multi-year funding request agreements has been approved by the Ministry of the Education. This will assist us in retain the expertise required to ensure the educational priorities of First Nation communities are addressed in the provincial education system in a very timely manner. We also look forward to establishing a robust and honorable or meaningful collaborative process with the Ministry of Education to ensure the experience and the knowledge of First Nations is accurately reflected through the province's curriculum. And I'm sure Regional Chief Glenn Hare would say, you know, if there's any correct curriculum being developed for residential schools, we have to include the First Nations and the survivors in this whole process. While we welcome additional funding for school boards to produce supports that better meet the needs of First Nation learners, we ask for continued efforts to ensure school boards co-develop these supports with their local First Nation partners through all phases of development, from concept to the implementation and all ongoing evaluation. So I'd like to say miigwech to my friend Greg and Minister Lecce, and I'll pass the mic over to Joanne Myers. Miigwech, and have a wonderful day from the Old Water Treaty area. Miigwech.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to begin by thanking Elder Vivian Roy for the beautiful and thoughtful prayer and getting us started in a good way. I would also like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinabek, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. I also wish to recognize the presence of a vibrant Métis community in the region, as well as the presence of many diverse First Nations and Inuit communities. Minister Lecce, Minister Rickford, the MNO applauds the ministry's announcement, which would bring Ontario's curriculum in line with recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. This would ensure that age-appropriate mandatory curriculum content pertaining to residential schools, treaties, and the lives of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples is made available to all students. Métis Nation of Ontario welcomes an increased focus on the important issue of strengthening Indigenous content and learning. And we look forward to meaningful engagement to increase knowledge of Ontario Métis history, culture, ways of life, and language in schools. We are encouraged that the ministry will work with us to develop a distinctions-based curriculum that is rich in Métis history, culture, ways of life and knowing, land, language, governance, rights, and issues present in Ontario. Gaps in education and educational services continue to be lived reality for Métis in Ontario. The MNO looks forward to collaborative work with the ministry and our Métis communities to bridge the gaps in education and educational services. We will work with the ministry to safeguard the perspectives of our Métis communities while supporting and respecting our First Nations and Inuit partners. Once again, thank you, Minister Lecce and Minister Rickford, for this step forward today. We very much look forward to working collaboratively with Ontario and seeing how the minister's announcement will translate into increased capacity and support for the MNO to pursue this very important work. Merci, miigwech. Thank you.
Okay. Good. Thanks, Jeff, so much. What are we doing?
We'll go to the floor here for questions. So first question will come from City News.
Hi, Minister. Ryan from City News. Currently, schools across the province are losing teachers, resulting in larger class sizes because of lower than expected in-person learning enrollment. This is resulting in larger class sizes, split grades, and loss of cohorts. School boards are saying they have to do this because your ministry mandate on class size minimums. Are you considering putting a pause on class size mandates so that we can keep classes smaller and cohorts in place?
Yeah, we've been very clear, which is why for the second year in a row during COVID-19, we've provided over $380 million to school boards to ensure we can deliver on the distancing that is recommended by public health. In addition to the layered approach our government has taken by stepping up in a big way air ventilation improvements in all schools in this province with 70,000 HEPA units in place within our learning spaces. The fact that our HVAC systems, there's literally been $600 million of investment to improve our mechanical ventilation as well. So we are following the best advice of the Chief Medical Officer of Health. We have put in place the funding to ensure distancing, indoor masking, enhanced cleaning, a strict screening protocol before a child enters the school. And we're looking at additional ways by which we can continue to support safe and open schools. And of course, we want to make sure that our classrooms remain safe. We're obviously pleased to hear the Chief Medical Officer of Health confirm that so far our school system has been resilient. And we want to make sure that we keep these schools open. We know how important it is for the mental and physical health of children.
Follow up?
You say that money has been set aside for spacing and teachers, but that's not the reality of what's happening on the ground. Students are in classrooms with more than 30 students. Children are being told they can't move from their seats because the classroom is too small to social distance. What do you want to say to parents who say that this government are again failing students and putting their health and safety at risk?
Well, I think what I'd note to families in Ontario is the Chief Medical Officer of Health of our province has endorsed the protocol. He's called it cautious by design and world-class. Those are his words. And the result of that protocol, that cautious protocol, is that we have children in our province, 2 million no less, learning each and every day in safe schools. With major investment in air ventilation, where we have deployed 70,000 HEPA units within our classrooms, where we've improved the HVAC systems within mechanically ventilated schools. We have 3-ply high-quality masks provided for our students, and likewise high-quality PPE for our staff. We have strengthened the testing protocol to introduce a phase 1 of our take-home testing to make life easier for those very parents. And to ensure we increase presenteeism. We get these kids back into school to stay in school because we know learning is foundational to their own health and to their academic success. We've invested $1.6 billion overall. We have followed all the best expertise of the Ontario Science Table, and we're going to continue to do so to ensure our kids remain safe, that our schools remain open, and that these kids can continue to learn.
We'll go to the next question, please.
Hi, Minister.
Hi there.
You talked about the mandatory learning that's already part of the curriculum in some of the higher grades. Are you considering at all introducing mandatory standalone courses for Indigenous studies?
So there are standalone courses for Indigenous studies within our curriculum currently. We're strengthening the language courses, their offerings to students. We've also ensured when we work on strengthening curriculum that part of this is a recognition that there was a gap in the current complement of learning, where grades 1 to 3 within our social science program did not have any learning really related to Indigenous history, culture, contribution, and most specifically on residential schools. And following the advice of Indigenous leaders and elders, and through a co-development process, we've come to a decision point, and we've been working with them for many months, to be fair, over 2021 to get to this place, to announce this formally and to take a step forward, both in the context of language, in the strengthening of residential school learning, and the completion of learning between grade 1 to high school, creating a continuum of learning, part of our commitment to reconciliation.
And are Jim and Joanne still on the line and available for questions?
Jim, Bob, are you there?
No, they're not.
They're not.
They're not.
I will direct this to you then. Kids are going to be in school.
Jim Bob is still alive,
Yeah.
available. I can ask him to unmute.
Okay, if you can still hear me, just hoping you can talk a little bit about, kids are going to be in school tomorrow.
Yes.
What lessons are you hoping that they will be learning, be exposed
Right.
to tomorrow in schools?
Sure. We have put out a request to all school boards in Ontario, part of what we're calling a day of an opportunity for learning. But I want to be clear, September 30th is the first day for the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, but it's not the only day. It has to be every day where we realize our commitment to reconciliation and embed that into learning. Now, for tomorrow specifically, we've requested all schools and school boards to create that opportunity for learning specifically to the positive contributions of First Nation, Métis, and Inuit to Canada, as well as the residential school component that I think is so critical today, perhaps more than ever. There's a generation of students like myself that would not have learned that within our curriculum. And while we can't go back, we must move forward with a sense of determination and collaboration with our Indigenous partners. And through co-development under their leadership, we can get this right. And I think tomorrow will be a meaningful step among many on a journey of reconciliation. But I will defer to any of the leaders with us today if they'd like to add their perspectives on those takeaways.
Okay. Yeah, if Jim is available to answer, that would be great as well.
Anything?
Is Jim Bob going?
I've asked him to unmute. He might not be listening.
I can always
Okay.
try to connect you after, Allison.
Thanks, Allison.
And we'll go to the next question.
Hello, bonjour. Question en français pour le ministre Rickford. Pourquoi est-ce qu'on vise l'année 2023 pour compléter les programmes, sachant que c'est des demandes qui sont demandées depuis longtemps? Pourquoi pas l'année prochaine tout de suite?
Je ne suis pas sûr que je comprends la question. Est-ce que vous pouvez répéter?
Est-ce que l'échéancier, selon vous, pourquoi est-ce qu'on prend 2 ans à compléter tous les programmes? Pourquoi septembre 2023 et pas l'année prochaine?
Ouais, au départ, je pense que mon collègue est mieux positionné pour répondre à cette question. On sait bien que maintenant, nous avons déjà des programmes, des activités qui adressaient cette matière très importante. Et c'est une évolution. On a bien engagé avec les leaders et plusieurs d'autres qui sont bien investis dans le système d'éducation autochtone. Et nous sommes certains que ce projet, cette étape qu'on a pris aujourd'hui, va être important et plus important dans le futur. Et on va travailler, bien sûr, avec nos partenaires pour assurer que nous avons le correct méthode de pédagogie et aussi que les leçons et toutes les autres activités sont appropriées et bien compris. Et on a le soutien des gens autochtones. Merci.
Toujours en français, demain, c'est la première journée nationale pour la vérité et réconciliation. Ce n'est pas un jour férié en Ontario. Comment est-ce que vous espérez que les Ontariens vont commémorer cette journée?
Mais moi, je pense que cette question est très intéressante dans le sens que on n'a pas le consensus parmi les leaders autochtones. Aujourd'hui, nous avons fait une annonce qui met l'emphase sur l'éducation, l'histoire de Indian Residential School et que les étudiants vont être là dans leur place dans l'école. Et moi, je pense que, à moins le leadership, le conseil autochtone qui nous écoute souvent, décider, avec toutes les autres provinces peut-être, que nous avons un consensus d'avoir un congé officiel, c'est possible. Mais pour la première, moi je pense que c'est important, pas juste la journée de 30 septembre, mais toutes les journées cette semaine, par exemple, on met l'emphase sur l'éducation et les activités sur cette histoire tragique. Et dans le futur, s'il y a un congé officiel, je vais continuer de me poser une question comme est-ce que c'est le congé officiel la meilleure méthode? Moi, je pense que c'est une question parmi les leaders autochtones dans cette province. Et nous n'avons pas un accord avec ça. Et c'est notre priorité comme un gouvernement d'assurer que nous suivons le conseil de ces leaders. Voilà. Merci.
Merci, thank you.
Great, thank you. And we'll have one final question, and that will conclude today's event.
Minister, why didn't your government make tomorrow a day off for everyone to honor Indigenous people and the wrongs they have done to this country?
Well, first off, with respect to the Ministry of Education, I mean, we thought it was critical that 2 million children are in our schools learning, part of an opportunity for learning and part of our broad collective obligation for reconciliation to actually learn, part of a mandate that creates greater understanding of the positive contributions First Nation, Inuit, and Métis have made to our communities, but also recognizing the dark chapter related to the residential school system. And we have an opportunity to change the hearts and minds of young people, to inspire them, but also to create the awareness that I think every citizen must have. And by working tomorrow, building it into our school system on the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation and strengthening our curriculum overall, as we are doing with between grades 1 and 3, building up and strengthening the curriculum with respect to Indigenous learning and residential schools, I think we can pursue our commitment to reconciliation in a much more meaningful way. And I know that our partners and Indigenous leaders want that curriculum, that learning to be taken seriously, and we certainly hope and expect that across Ontario tomorrow. Anything you'd like to add? I'd like to turn it over to Minister Rickford.
Yeah, thank you for that question, and I had addressed that very point to our French Francophone media. Look, there is not the consensus out there. I know that there have been some Indigenous leaders and other political persons who have weighed in on this. Frankly, we meet very regularly. I meet nearly every week or every other week with Indigenous leaders. And I think until we have consensus on the most meaningful way to have, as Terry had said to me this morning, a somber day of reflection doesn't necessarily jive with the concept of a holiday. We want to make sure, first and foremost, as Minister Lecce has today, that this is part of embedded in our curriculums, that it's integrated in standalone courses, but also in the context of how Canada came to be. And I know that I've spoken to Indigenous leaders who think the best place for that to occur is through specific events on that day, in the workplace, and in particular, for the purposes of today, at school. So the discussion will evolve here in Ontario and across the country, as there are a number of other provinces who have yet to make a holiday an official event. We will proceed, as we always have on this matter, by an Indigenous-led decision-making and makers. And we continue to consult with them. We appreciate their input on this. And for now, we think that today is an important way to help understand that tomorrow is a period of reflection. And I encourage everyone to think about it that way. Think about for yourself what the best way to reflect on that is, not just tomorrow, but throughout the year. For the purposes of today's announcement, I think we all, as Ontarians, take great comfort in the fact that this will become part of our curriculum for the first time, for Stephen's generation and for my generation, who went without this kind of education as students and came by it through our professional endeavors, and ensure that whatever this day is, it is only part of a more important narrative for us to understand the legacy of Indian residential school, and the power and the opportunity of integrating Indigenous teachings in our education system and across other activities for the benefit of the people of Ontario and Canada as a whole. Thank you for that question.
Thanks so much, everyone.